Welcome and thank you all for joining us today, wherever in the world you are joining us from. Today, we will be going through an awesome presentation with three fantastic folks. The session today is Stacks Not Suites, Driving a Winning E-Commerce Strategy. And we have Joe Cicman, Senior Analyst of Forrester, Kelly Gaish, Chief Product Officer at Commerce Tools, and Neha Sampat, CEO and founder at Contentstack. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Joe.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. I hope you and your families are staying safe and comfortable. I'm Joe Cicman. I cover B2B commerce, digital experience platforms, and marketplaces within Forrester's digital transformation practice. And thanks for taking time today to talk about Stacks, Not Suites. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to kind of set the stage on what's behind the need for flexible technology in the first place. In 2019, 85% of executives held the view that digital was a nice to have, and the other 15% held the view that it was a must have and they were working on it. But this year, the 85% heard the COVID wake up call. They heard it every hour of every day from March until today. And it wasn't just about working from home. It was about taking care of customers who couldn't leave their home. When the lockdowns went into effect, physical channels evaporated. And as a result of that, we experienced 10 years worth of e-commerce growth in just 3 months. And that growth wasn't just in simple catalog shopping. Sales teams digitalized their consultative selling. Marketplaces captured demand from buyers who were trying to source goods to deal with their own supply disruption. Businesses that had invested in digital over the past 5 years were serving customers with Black Friday level peaks day after day. That's because the lockdowns forced a behavior change among consumers, with 40% saying that they've been buying more things online than they normally do. But unlike Cyber Week that comes and goes on a calendar, consumers say they intend to prolong these new online habits. A third of consumers say they don't plan to return to stores and resume their normal shopping behavior as soon as those stores are open. And more than half say they plan to slowly return to shopping in stores. And despite the conflicting sales projections, after the dust settled on Cyber Week, the consensus was a 20% increase in digital sales and about a 50% decrease in store sales. It's worth reminding everyone that this shift to digital isn't just a 2020 thing. In 2019, Forrester conducted a survey to understand direct-to-consumer buying preferences. And we found that 45% of online adults are interested in purchasing directly from a brand rather than a retailer or a marketplace. And as consumers increasingly prefer direct brand engagement, this gives brands both the challenge and the opportunity to stand out. No one could have predicted the disruption caused by COVID. And the situation on the ground is still changing day to day, as some nations are now going into a second wave of lockdowns that are expected to be longer than the first wave. The situation is unpredictable. So to adapt, you need modern technology and methods for the unpredictable market conditions we're going to have for the foreseeable future. As you become more of a digital business, you'll grow into what we call Forrester's digital experience reference architecture. See, an e-commerce transaction is just one of many capabilities you'll build into your digital customer experiences. You'll introduce brand partnerships. You'll integrate local service installation. And if you sell something like heavy equipment, you might even add remote monitoring services that leverage IoT devices. As this pandemic continues to assert massive pressure on your direct sales teams and your indirect distribution partners, and as your buyers are hesitant to have you visit their facilities, you have license to deliver more and more of your brand experience digitally. And when you embrace modular architecture, you get the agility you need to create high impact experiences that matter for your customers and for your partners. Because transacting is just one piece of the entire customer lifecycle. It's one piece of your entire brand experience. Digital customer experience is a key business differentiator. So development professionals need to step up and partner with marketing and business leaders by transforming their organizations, platforms, and processes. Not only is digital customer experience a key differentiator, but when done well, it delivers differential value. In short, getting customer experience right leads to loyalty, which is retention, enrichment, and advocacy, and that drives business growth. You're looking at Forrester's CX Index. It allows us to model the impact of improving customer experiences on key business metrics. We published this for 18 different industries. And with it, we determined the business benefit of having a loyal customer. That's the potential revenue from improved retention, enrichment, and advocacy loyalty. And we determined the relationship between CX scores and loyalty-driven business benefits. COVID put customer experience in the spotlight. In April, we asked service providers what they were hearing from their clients about shifts in their business. Number one was managing a remote workforce. But once that got taken care of, numbers 2 and 3 were digital customer experience and customer service. Why? Well, the only revenue channel was the digital one, if they had a digital revenue channel. Looking forward, 2021 will be the year that a majority of companies, not just the 15% of firms that were already digitally savvy, will fund a portfolio of investments in technology-fueled experiences, operations, products, and ecosystems. 20% of global firms will stand up new digital divisions. As digital engagement becomes the #1 driver of customer value, digital products and hybrid digital products will drive greater share of revenue. Advanced manufacturers will join John Deere and Siemens and redesign or build products with subscription services and value derived from software, data, connections, and AI. By the end of 2021, we expect 30% of billion-dollar-plus firms to have a significant digital product portfolio and 20% to stand up new digital divisions dedicated to launching disruptive products. These divisions will be bolted onto their parent company to incubate products, attract new talent, and operate many times faster than their parent. And half of those will launch at least one multi-million-dollar business. Every one of those new digital divisions will embrace a cloud-first innovation strategy. And this is a continuation and an acceleration of an existing trend. Year over year, our technographics data shows increased adoption of the technology that's foundational to composable experiences, that's foundational to supporting agile ways of working. Organizationally, firms embrace 3 common operating models, but 2 of them break at scale. 3 digital operating models have emerged: centralized, distributed, and federated. However, as firms scale, the first 2 models really constrain their ability to maintain digital maturity growth beyond a single business unit. So first up, centralized. Centralized digital teams often accelerate digital adoption as local leaders look to the central team to manage digital experiences on their behalf. But this approach can work for single brands, single country firms like a local credit union or insurers. Only 14% of global firms maintain a distributed digital operating model, and only 10% of digital leaders in those firms of all sizes believe distributing digital capabilities with no central control function is the ideal operating model. So federated teams, such as Nestle's digital acceleration team, strive to promote common standards, reusability, and best practice sharing across executional brand and regional teams. This demands a fine balance between local empowerment and central control. And transforming into a digital business requires that you overcome old school thinking and tear down your legacy organizational structures to shift from an inside out to an outside in paradigm. 15% of North American and European enterprises are digitally advanced, and this cohort is growing faster on average than digital intermediates and digital beginners. Of companies that are in an advanced stage of digital maturity, 73% say that improving their ability to innovate is a high or critical priority. And when we ask companies at a beginner stage of digital maturity, only 25% agree with that statement. Successful companies in the 2020s will focus on their core and smartly outsource and leverage the surrounding ecosystems. If you want to future-proof your digital experiences and make your business composable, you need to start with parts that you can compose, and those parts are cloud parts. The old school monolithic on-prem systems just aren't composable because they were developed before APIs were the pervasive model for building software systems. That's why APIs are important, and that's why they're a must-have. So let's dig into what it means for your digital experience investments to include ecosystem partners. And again, a reminder, the ecosystem of cloud parts are served up as APIs. This concept of innovation through ecosystems means that you work in concert with many partners, each working independently to improve their contribution to your outcomes. And firms like Goldman Sachs have really industrialized their approach to innovation through ecosystems. They outsource for speed and co-innovation. You need to think differently about what outsource means. It's not labor arbitrage, it's technology arbitrage. Cloud providers offer prepackaged parts that firms can deploy to move quickly. Goldman did this with its Marcus subsidiary. It worked with a partner to orchestrate the resources of the cloud, like analytics, doc signing, Microsoft Azure, and CRM. And time to launch was 18 months. And each of those cloud parts has been getting better every day since. And they orchestrate for agility and differentiation. So nothing is built from a single part, and no part by itself will differentiate you. But pulling cloud parts together into a unique business architecture can fulfill a unique value proposition and operate for insights and resilience. You can build cloud resilience into your operating model when you instrument those cloud parts. Marcus used this technique to identify that loan fees were causing some applicants to stop the loan process. So the solution? Well, eliminate those fees by pricing the processing costs into the loan rate. As you select the technology you need for these high impact digital interactions, be smart about what you do and what you let others do for you. And look to the ecosystem for partners with capabilities that they're motivated to continuously improve. Don't build a cloud, subscribe to a cloud. Don't build document signing, subscribe to a document signing service. And if you need help orchestrating all these third-party services, engage a systems integrator. In case you were wondering, the Antelope is in fact literally outsourcing bug fixes. So now it's time for the roundtable, and I'm going to hand this off to Kelly Gaish.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. So I want to pose some questions to primarily Neha, but also you, Joe, as well. And let's start by talking about the term platform. So is the term platform in a mock context where M is microservices, A is API, C is cloud native multi-tenant SaaS, and H is headless? Is the term platform what you want to be using anymore? Is it an antiquated term?
So I could start, Kelly, and thanks for posing that. It's interesting because we talk about stacks, not suites. And in a traditional world, if you think of platform, you're kind of thinking about suite. And at the same time, we do see ourselves branding as, for example, a Contentstack, a content experience platform. And so what does platform mean? And like we get hung up on it, and there's arguments that happen all the time inside the organization, and the technology differences, and the folks in Europe think of it differently than the folks in the US. And so that will continue, and the debate will go on. But I think from my perspective, we're kind of getting hung up on the wrong thing. What we really want to care about is it doesn't matter what you're called. Is it a platform or suite, a hub, or infrastructure? What really matters is, are we enabling customers to do what they're trying to do in a new world, in a modern world, in a world where APIs are pervasive? And that really relates back to, is it composable? And Joe touched on that. Is it flexible? Does it allow you to do things that are new, innovative? Does it allow you to enable really cool, interesting digital experiences that engage your audience? And so for me, it almost doesn't matter what the term is, but I'm curious to hear what you both think.
Yeah, I would say that, it's a sticky wicket because there's a wide variety of understandings and usage of the term platform, not all of which are modern. So, we just got to the point where people are understanding headless. It's, boy, if we could come up with another word besides platform to hang our hats on, that would be, really great. And really, to understand underneath, the characteristics of what that platform is supposed to do for a business, as opposed to, getting into, definitional discusussion of, what really is a platform.
Yeah, I think we're past labels as a society, right? But we at Commerce Schools have debates about this, and it's funny because it breaks down largely among Germans versus the Americans, and Americans hate the term platform by and large. Germans love the term platform. It brings order to chaos, and it's seen as a very positive thing. It's a system, and it's just so funny because we don't have those differences between the two countries ever, and that's really the only thing that there's been a marked difference about, just kind of that split.
Interesting. So I have a kind of a follow-up question. I think there's also kind of a different view if you're a business user or a technology user, and just thinking about like the mock mindset in general. One of our competitors has really sided with the developer, and they talk about their product and their platform from the perspective of it being developer oriented. And they've actually gone as far as to say that the marketer's role is slowly subsiding and becoming less and less relevant and important. And I react really strongly to that as both a previous marketer, but also with everything that we do at Contentstack, we think really equally about both the developer and the sort of the technology user, and also the business user. And for us, it's really important that those roles are equal, because both are orchestrating the magical experiences that we want to see in digital. And so from that perspective, I'm curious, for us, we think about you shouldn't have to settle regardless of what your role is in an organization. I'm curious to hear what you both think about that.
I think you can do both. Obviously, technology enables business, but ultimately it's the marketers who have the relationships with customers. And they need tooling that works, and they need tooling that works really well, because they're the ones who work with the software every single day, all day. And it's important that they be able to use technology to tell their story to their customers and connect emotionally with their customers.
Yeah, Kelly's right. As an analyst, I look at a future-facing vision, and I ask myself, well, what is it today, and what does the split look like today? And even though you can make a statement, any vendor can make a statement about what's out in the future, it's also very, very important to deal with the realities today. And today, there's digital teams are organized with marketers who are not coders, and coders who are not marketers. So there's a departmental split that exists today that really has to be served today.
Agreed. Awesome. Just kind of continuing down the sort of the mock mindset, and you talked about what mock is, Kelly, but if you think about the stacks versus suites approach from the perspective of a vendor, right, not necessarily the buyer, what is it that's different for that vendor? Like how do they ensure that they remain relevant and that they're in the mock mindset, and how is that different than a traditional vendor?
Well, it used to be pre-cloud that vendors would do a little bit of everything, right? And they would have, looking in the commerce space, they would have marketing, they would have CRM, they'd have a call center app, they would have loyalty and personalization. I mean, you name it, they would have a little bit of everything. And that's because back in the day, it was very difficult to go out and buy all these components piecemeal and integrate them together. And now with mock, especially cloud, they're enabling that. You can go out and buy software from specialized vendors who do one thing and one thing really well, right? And that's the whole promise of microservices, right? Is specialization. And it's really easy to go out and find vendors that do personalization or search or content or commerce really well. But what matters in this new ecosystem is that as a vendor, you are actually delivering on that one thing you do really, really well, right? And we at Commerce Tools are laser focused on just commerce, right? We're never going to be a CRM platform or an OMS. I mean, there are 1,000 things we could go, into adjacent spaces, but in this world, you have to be the absolute best vendor at your specific business function and do that well. And also on an ongoing basis, you have to fulfill the customer's need, because customers are paying for your services every single month. And it's really important that you are available and delivering new functionality, and that you are constantly evolving with the customer. So you have to earn their business, where if you bought a suite from a mega vendor 10 years ago, they get your upfront check and they walk away from the deal, and that's it. That's kind of the end of the relationship. But with SaaS vendors like us, it's the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And it's actually like the most interesting shift that's happened to me in the industry since the rise of SaaS is, and software that you have to subscribe to rather than that you have to buy a license, a perpetual license for, because the burden has shifted onto the vendor to ensure that the customer is happy finally. And that's what we do. We do it every day, and we work really hard as the vendors to ensure that we earn the next month's revenue.
Yeah, there's a virtuous set of incentives in place like this. That's one aspect. If you look at the Agile Manifesto and you look at even sort of like the philosophy behind microservices, irrespective of whether they all exist within one mega company or not. These are just these can become extraordinarily complex spaghetti code monoliths to manage. And the problem becomes simpler to manage when you break it down to those component parts with contracts in and out. So you can really apply a lot of agile lessons with architecture lessons and apply that then to the business ecosystem of providers. And you're spot on. You have to earn that business every month. Those are wonderful incentives. It's hard as a provider to keep being great, but the market gets served when those types of pressures are put onto companies. Yeah. And frankly, those companies are served as well because their total addressable market is much larger. They can be recombinated with offerings beyond what just is in the mega vendor portfolio. So there's goodness on all ends of it.
So speaking of mega vendors, a lot of these folks are saying that their old products are magically Mach certified, right? And they're now they've been rewritten successfully, and they've been made microservice based and API first, and cloud native multi-tenant SaaS and headless. And what do you both think about that? Is that just vendors lying? Or is this a real thing that you can actually do that?
I mean, I'll say it's not easy. And so no, when someone tells me that they've modernized their stack or their architecture to become Mach or API oriented, it's not something you can do overnight. And it's a combination of the technology being difficult to retrofit, but also, and probably more importantly, the mindset. Right? If you're a SaaS company and you're born in the modern era and you're born and innovated in the world of pervasive APIs, you're built differently. And that's not just how the technology is built, but it's also the way that you think and the way that your business model is oriented. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you are used to selling a perpetual license and then tacking on a bunch of professional services, that's a completely different business model than saying, subscribe to my software and I'm going to make it better as you continue to use it. And I'm going to continue innovating every 2 weeks and deliver you something new and exciting and interesting and solve your problems. And that's a big difference. They're just completely different mindsets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some first person experience in this realm. Plus I talk to a lot of vendors and other tech professionals who have, theoretically you can understand how to break the monolith. Practically, it is extraordinarily difficult. So there's one, like it's extraordinarily difficult. And two, what I would say is I do hear this API first, and it's not uncommon for me to hear API first in the context of we have APIs. But API first means I defined the API first and then I wrote the code. And so if you walk back through, chronologically, what you find is a lot of this code was written before they defined the JSON format and the API structure. So I think that there are some liberties being taken with, API first, but an educated buyer, which is what I try to serve here at Forrester, an educated buyer should be able to piece together when the API was defined and when the code was written.
Well, it's funny. Sometimes we compete against vendors that wrote their code back in the 90s. REST APIs literally weren't invented until 2000, and they weren't in any widespread use until 2005, 2006. So I always get a chuckle when vendors are claiming that they were API first when APIs couldn't have possibly even existed when they wrote their code.
So Kelly, talk us through the difference between API first and headless. And as a part of the Mach, this sort of acronym, what is the difference between those two?
Sure, it's something that a lot of folks ask about. So the A in Mach is API first. So that's writing the API first and then implementing the microservice behind the API. The H though is the head, right? So that's what the customer actually interacts with. That's the customerfacing.com, that's the app, right? And that's how you consume. So the A is for APIs, it's how you produce if you're the vendor. And the H is how you consume that functionality for your head, and having the head, the front end, decoupled from your back end.
Great, thank you. So just kind of a follow on there, we talked about the different models and you know, old school and new school technology. When we think about how software gets implemented and oftentimes then never touched again, why does that happen? Even though that there's clear financial benefits and competitive benefits to continuing to innovate, what happens? What stops that?
It's so frustrating because sometimes in sales, I'm asked to you know, to come in towards the end and just provide sponsorship from the product side. And in a chunk of our opportunities, somebody's running, you know, ATG, which is owned by Oracle. You know, it was implemented in 2003, right? So it's been there 17 years, and they'll kick the can down the road another year or two. And I think fundamentally it's because a lot of folks fear change. Change is scary. Change leads to perceived instability. And often the financial incentives are aligned to keep things in place and kick the can down the road another year, rather than take a hard decision and possibly screw it up. And I think that's a failure on business leadership, because there is a very clear return on investment. You know, there are very clear incentives to going in and modernizing that technology. Some of the software we have to integrate with at Commerce Tools is just obscene. You know, it's batch files being FTP'd every day. You know, like that's still common. Look at the point of sale, right? Those point of sale systems are just beyond antiquated. So there's clear return on investment for doing it. But I think a lot of people, just the way that companies are set up, the incentives are aligned against individuals making changes. And I think a lot of individuals don't have the skills to go and make a comprehensive business case that they should make these investments in technology.
Kind of goes back to that mindset shift, right? Like it's sort of going through this process, and again, going back to where you are in terms of your digital maturity, you've either agreed and accepted that the best way forward is to adopt something more modern, or you're still kind of stuck in that old mindset. And that's something that we see changing every day in the industry, but there is a process that people have to go through to get there.
Yeah, when I talk to clients, I try to narrow it down to, are you still waterfall? And if the answer is yes, then that sort of explains a lot. You know, I'll have digital teams come to me and sort of lay out their problems, and you know, they got journey maps, that all sounds really good. They evaluated all those friction points. They've got a backlog, that all sounds good. So I ask, well, why have you started on this? And they'll say, well, I always get 12 to 18 month effort estimates out of my IT team. I'm like, are you by chance waterfall? So, okay, well, there's your problem right there. Like, it's just all of the thinking around, you know, that accompanies waterfall dev shops. That's why projects, that's why reluctance to change, that's why change, you know, change boards, all of that sort of stuff has emerged. To be agile and to do, you know, continuous integration, continuous delivery, you have to rethink team structures as well as change management. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to get retooled in order for the technology to, well, in order to be able to, you know, reliably adopt the technology. But there is a payoff. There's a wonderful payoff.
So Joe, how do you help them get into that the correct mindset, or what are some of the obstacles that you help them get through, and how do you do that?
Yeah, gradually, because it requires, you know, it's organizational change management as well. This is not like, well, I'll give you an example. So, you know, we will talk about either gradually adopting, like, just take one team, make them agile, you know, instead of like transforming the whole org to agile, and start to build a base of support where you've got a group of folks who are proving how it can get done. And the stuff that they're doing is incremental efficiency gains, which essentially could fund sort of further innovation, and sort of build that base of support. It does take, you know, a leader with people savvy, maybe some charisma, to bring everyone along on this transformation. And when that doesn't work, we see these digital divisions spinning up, right? To just say, look, if it's so difficult and you still want to run waterfall, you still want to run, just keep the lights on, that's fine. I'm going to do my innovation over here. And, you can manage the email servers, and we're going to do, the mobile app as an example.
Yeah, well said. So now, why is now the right time for mock? Right. So we've been talking about mock as a term for a while. We've had cloud on the market since what, 2008-ish, give or take. And we see a lot of new vendors pop up, and that is now, it seems to be the default. But why, for folks at the top of the technology adoption bell curve and that latter half, why is now the right time for this?
So I see four things happening across our customer base and the prospects that we talk to, and even across the ecosystem of partners we're discussing. The first is that there's a lot of different data and systems that have been adopted by organizations, and they're all disconnected, right? There's all this disparate data that organizations will get more value from if they're connected to something and if they're talking to each other. So that's one, it's sort of that integration drive. The second is that you've got business teams and technology teams that kind of want to do the same thing, but they don't know how to work together yet. And like harmonizing those two sides of the table is super powerful if you figure out how to do it. And now some of this technology that's coming up is allowing that to happen. The third is that everyone has sort of at least accepted that there's more than just web. There's omni-channel digital experiences that need to be adopted, whether it's just web and mobile for now, or organizations that are a little bit more modern are doing web, mobile, maybe smartwatches, maybe jumbotrons, maybe in-store kiosks, but omni-channel has become a really important thing. And a thread to that is personalization. And so adding those sort of different components together becomes an important strategic initiative for an organization. And then finally, it's the digital maturity, right? Digital maturity, where it was a year ago and where it accelerated to in the COVID year, has also kind of been enlightening for everyone. So if you put those sort of four different things that are happening across the majority of organizations together, it's the time for mock. The time is now.
Yeah, agreed. Anything to add, Joe?
Your point about acceleration in COVID, there had been this debate about, hey, is this fancy schmancy stuff really as good as my on-premise app server? When COVID hit, you didn't have time to do all the procurement, just to buy the stuff. You didn't have time to install it. However, you were able to get the stuff from the cloud, which was structured, per mock. So in a pinch, it was the only thing that worked. So imagine yourself not in a pinch. Imagine yourself being able to take that agility and that speed and apply it not to surviving, but to seizing opportunities. So I think that, COVID kind of really demonstrated the value of this flexible tech.
What do you think, Kelly? Is the time now?
Absolutely. I think there are enough good public reference use cases out there that have shown that this is successful. This is the right approach. And at the same time, the legacy vendors are all dying. They've all given up. I mean, Oracle let half of their commerce folks go. IBM divested of Webster Commerce a while ago. That first generation is, at least in the commerce space specifically, and I'm seeing the same thing in the content space, is just dead. And that whole approach is antiquated. It's funny, when I was hiring product managers directly, a question I used to ask product managers was, what's the difference between single and multi-tenancy? And to me, that's a perfectly fair question. But I would have really good candidates who would be completely stumped by that. And it would be deer in the headlights, couldn't understand what on earth I was talking about. And I realized after doing enough of these interviews, nobody under the age of about 28 has ever dealt with single tenant hosted software. Like, they literally don't know what single tenancy is because they've grown up in a cloud only world. And now we've had a whole generation of IT folks who have only ever bought things from cloud. So the whole concept of going to a mega vendor and writing out a gigantic check for a 4-year ULA and then downloading Java virtual machine, and then getting an app server, and then getting a database, and then getting all the network gear and connecting it all together, and then deploying your app. Like that whole concept just is so foreign to anybody under the age of 30 that it's just, of course, it's now the time for mock. I mean, we've been laying this foundation for a long time as an industry, and it's been proven to be quite successful.
So by nodding and agreeing and understanding what you're talking about, we're all dating ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at the memory of that the video of the two millennials trying to use a rotary telephone. Just baffled by it.
Yes, we definitely had one of those. So let's talk about what types of organizations are actually ready for mock and why. Like what is it about them that's allowing them to move in this direction? Here we go.
I see modern, forward, agile organizations, as Joe was mentioning, right? Those who are not on waterfall, those who have gone headless, those that have widely adopted cloud. You know, maybe we can go through some of these joint customers here. But Burberry is all in on mock, for example. You know, they've been live now for a couple weeks. They've been implementing for about 6 months, extremely successful. And they're also part of the Mock Alliance Advisory Board. You know, they're that happy with this new approach. They're very strong advocates for what we're doing. We'll go next with Dawn.
It's been awesome to see Burberry sort of reinvent itself as a digital leader over the last several years. And I feel like they've pushed the limits of what you can do with mock to a certain extent, and they've helped us from the Contentstack view of the world to make our product better. So it's been a pleasure to work with a brand like them.
Well, it's also great because historically those fashion brands were the exact ones to go to an all-in-one suite vendor, write out a check, and then not deal with IT, right? And what they've realized, and you know, a lot of other brands have realized this as well, is that to be dominant, you have to embrace technology, and you have to be, I don't know if you want to be technology first, but you have to have a really solid grasp of technology and bring a lot of that competency in-house in order to succeed today. So Neha, do you want to talk about Dawn?
Sure, yeah. So Dawn Foods is such an interesting company. If you think about their history, they were originally known for donuts, and it was a family-owned business. And over the years, they grew into an incredible food-based company. And they were actually one of the brands that moved really quickly, and they were able to quickly move off of old infrastructure and adopt both e-commerce and content management in record time, and have since been advocates and spokespeople for the mock sort of stack. And it's just been time after time, just showing the quick time to value and being able to grow in this economy as a foods business has been incredible to watch.
Yeah, and what I like about their approach is they're a B2B food distributor, right? And they have a multi-billion-dollar business baking donuts and other pastries for like Walmart or for the convenience stores. You know, so technology is not their strong suit. But what they did is they set up a whole separate labs group. They call it Dawn Digital, and they hired a very senior leader, Bob Howland, to go lead that organization. They gave him a big pile of money, and they set it up in Boston, where the rest of Dawn is based in Jackson, Michigan. And that's a great, the legacy Dawn Foods IT staff, with no offense to them, they're probably best at managing email servers and things like that. But, going out and having a budget and going and hiring some really strong product people in Boston is a fantastic way to get started with this. And it's allowed them to innovate very quickly. And then do you want to finally cover Express, and I'll chime in here as well?
Sure, yeah, so Express has been interesting as well. They came to us originally when they were challenged with using their legacy CMS vendor to do things within their mobile app. And specifically, it was a few months before Cyber Monday, which is historically very important. And they found that they were not able to set up the order portion of their mobile app to be able to be dynamic. And they were trying to do it, and they tried to retrofit the old technology to make it work, and it just didn't. And so they used Contentstack for that originally, and then they ended up moving the entire mobile site to Contentstack in order to enable a future-proof their Cyber Monday delivery, and they've been working with us ever since. And since then, they've also taken it to the next level and starting to do in-store kiosks and bringing the sort of physical and digital worlds together, and enabling personalization as a part of that process. So it's been really fun to watch them also kind of evolve.
Yeah, and Express is a great example of having an empowered change agent. In this case, it was Brendan Goldoni. We had some initial discussions, and he got it. He completely understood what we were after, and he had already been modernizing their organization to better support this type of approach. So we didn't have to educate him on anything. It was just, of course, this is how we would do commerce today. It makes perfect sense. And they've been live with us now for 2 Cyber 5 holiday periods, very successful. And I think it's just a great example of a legacy retailer really embracing technology and the clear benefits that has, because Brendan could have very easily just, kicked the can down the road 2 years. But, if they had to replatform now, especially with COVID, they would be in an awful lot of trouble. Anything to add, Joe?
I really like the Express story because it was told to me from the guy sitting in the seat next to me as we were both flying to NRF a few years ago. Because I live in Columbus, Brendan does as well.
That was a good story.
Yeah, it was, and I agree with you that he absolutely is a change agent. He absolutely is, a skilled and technically informed leader, and he did the difficult and meticulous organizational work to get his folks from organized around a JEE stack to how they would organize around a proper stack like what we're talking about here today.
Great. So there's a few examples of customers that have actually taken the leap forward and gone fully mock and setting the example for others. So thanks to both of you, Kelly and Joe. This was fun and enlightening, and it was a pleasure to spend the afternoon with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nia. Thanks, Kelly.